She was betrayed, manipulated, and disappeared for 5 years. Now he reappears, with another woman by his side. But what he doesn't know is that Emily has returned to destroy everything. Watch this story until the end. You'll be surprised by this story. If you like love stories, romance, subscribe to this channel, leave your comment. We post videos like this every day. Continuing. The brush glided over the golden surface with the precision of someone who knows every grain of paint, every breath of ancient wood. Emily Parker adjusted her protective glasses and stepped back 2 paces, observing the result of 3 weeks of meticulous work. The Baroque angel slowly emerged from centuries of neglect, its delicate features recovering the melancholic expression that some anonymous artist had carved with such care. It was 7 in the morning in Boston, and the restoration workshop at the National Museum of Historical Art still dozed in silence. Emily preferred to work alone during hours when the corridors echoed only her own footsteps and the distant murmur of the Charles River. There, among saints with broken eyes and peeling Madonnas, she had learned to reconstruct beauty without expecting anything in return. It was an honest, almost monastic craft. Each restored piece was a small resurrection, proof that some things could be saved from oblivion. She cleaned her hands on her leather apron and walked to the workbench where the invitation that had arrived the previous week rested. Heavy paper, embossed, with gold lettering in relief. St. Anthony Altarpiece Restoration Project, Millbrook Abbey. The discovery had been accidental. During renovations in the basement of a rural property near the abbey, workers had found fragments of a Baroque altarpiece buried for decades, possibly hidden during one of the French invasions. The piece, according to preliminary reports, contained unique artistic elements, with symbols that did not correspond to traditional Christian iconography. Emily folded the invitation and put it in her pocket. She had accepted the job not because of the generous remuneration offered by the international fund financing the project, but because of the complexity of the challenge. Over the past 5 years, since moving to Massachusetts, she had specialized in pieces considered lost by the academic community. She liked the idea of bringing to light things that others had given up for dead. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was Sarah, her assistant, with the breathless voice of someone who had run not to be late. "Emily, did you see the guest list for the project presentation tonight?" "Not yet. Why?" "There are some names that, well, maybe you want to prepare yourself." Emily frowned. Sarah had the annoying habit of dramatizing ordinary situations, but her voice sounded genuinely concerned. "Sarah, just tell me." "Nathan Reynolds is on the list. As legal consultant for the International Fund." The name fell like a stone in still water. Emily felt her stomach contract, a physical sensation that surprised her with its intensity. 5 years. 5 years since the last time she had heard that name spoken aloud. 5 years since she decided that some people were better buried in the past. "Emily, are you there?" "I am." Her voice came out firmer than expected. "Thank you for the information." She hung up before Sarah could add any pitying comment. She walked to the window overlooking the Charles River and rested her forehead on the cold glass. Boston stretched before her with its brick buildings and gentle hills, a city that had welcomed her without asking questions about what she had left behind in California. A city where Nathan Reynolds did not exist, where he was just a name in old documents that she had managed to forget. But memory has a life of its own, and hers, at that moment, decided to resurrect the image of him walking down Michigan Avenue in Chicago with his impeccable gray suit and the smile that promised things he would never deliver. Nathan the lawyer, Nathan the seducer, Nathan the liar. Nathan who had made her believe in pretty words while building an entire life based on omissions. Emily returned to work, but her hands trembled slightly. The Baroque angel observed her with its newly restored eyes, as if it could see through her carefully constructed defenses. She dipped the brush in golden paint and continued stroke by stroke to reconstruct a beauty that someone at some point had tried to destroy. The day passed slowly. Emily lunched alone at a cafe near the museum, reviewed the preliminary reports of the Millbrook altarpiece, and tried not to think about the inevitable evening encounter. At 5 in the afternoon, she went home to change clothes. She chose a simple black dress, low heels, hair pulled back in an elegant but effortless bun. She wanted to look professional, competent, indifferent. She wanted to look like someone who had completely overcome the past. The National Museum of Historical Art at night took on an almost theatrical solemnity. The works transformed into mysterious presences under careful lighting, and guests circulated among them like figures in a moving painting. Emily arrived promptly at 8 and went directly to the main hall, where a model of the altarpiece to be restored was displayed under spotlights. The piece was truly extraordinary. Even fragmented and damaged, it retained an impressive, expressive force. The sculpted angels had faces of disturbing humanity, as if they had witnessed things they would rather forget. And there were indeed strange symbols among the traditional floral motifs. Small marks that looked like cuts, blindfolded eyes, mouths sewn with golden threads. Fascinating, isn't it? The voice came from behind, low and familiar. Emily closed her eyes for a second before turning around. Nathan was there, 2 steps away, exactly as she remembered, and completely different at the same time. His hair, once always disheveled, was now cut with military precision. His face seemed more angular, as if the 5 years had removed any trace of youth. But his eyes remained the same, dark, intense, with that disconcerting ability to seem like they knew secrets about her that even she didn't know. Nathan. She pronounced the name as if it were a medical diagnosis. Neutral, factual, without emotion. Emily. He smiled, and for a moment it was as if time had not passed. You look beautiful. Massachusetts has been good to you. Thank you. She turned back to the model, feigning concentration. I see you work with historical heritage now. Among other things. Nathan positioned himself beside her, too close to be casual, too far to be intimate. The world is small, isn't it? After so long to meet again like this. The world is small, Nathan, but not as small as you'd like it to be. The response came out sharper than she intended. Nathan chuckled softly, a sound she remembered finding charming, and that now deeply irritated her. You haven't changed at all. I've changed everything. Emily looked at him directly. Absolutely everything. At that moment, a young woman approached the couple. She was tall, slim, with wavy blonde hair that fell over her shoulders like spilled light. She wore a light blue dress that enhanced her clear eyes and smiled with the naturalness of someone who never needed to defend herself from anything. Love you disappeared. The young woman touched Nathan's arm with familiarity, then extended her hand to Emily. You must be the famous restorer. I'm Zoe Miller. Nathan has spoken so much about your work. Emily shook the offered hand and observed Zoe carefully. There was something almost ethereal about her, a delicacy that seemed genuine. She wasn't the type of woman Emily would have expected to see with Nathan, too young, too innocent, too clean. Pleasure to meet you, Zoe. Nathan spoke about me? Only professionally, of course. Nathan quickly intervened. I mentioned that we had worked together in California. The lie was told with such naturalness that Emily almost admired the performance. They had never worked together. Nathan was a corporate lawyer. She was an art student when they met. The only project they shared was the methodical destruction of her heart. How interesting. Emily smiled at Zoe. And do you work with art too? I'm a visual artist. I mainly do installations. Actually, I'm preparing an exhibition about motherhood and faith for next month. Motherhood? Emily repeated the word slowly. What a profound theme. Zoe has extraordinary talent. Nathan placed his hand on the young woman's waist with a protective gesture. Her works have a very special sensitivity. Emily observed the interaction between the two and felt something she couldn't immediately identify. It wasn't jealousy, at least not exactly. It was more like recognizing a pattern, a repetition. The way Nathan tilted his head when speaking to Zoe, how he held her gaze a second longer than necessary, how he smiled with that mixture of admiration and possession. Emily knew that script. "Well, I'll leave you to talk." Zoe kissed Nathan on the cheek. "I need to speak with the curator about the date of my exhibition. It was a pleasure to meet you, Emily. I hope we can see each other more often." She walked away with light steps, greeting other people along the way. Nathan followed her with his gaze until she disappeared among the guests. "She's very young," Emily commented. "She's 26. "I said young, not a child." Nathan turned to her, and for the first time since their reunion, his smile faltered. "What do you mean by that?" "Nothing. Just an observation." They remained silent for a few minutes, pretending to admire the model of the altarpiece. The tension between them was almost palpable, like electricity in the air before a storm. "Emily, no. You don't even know what I was going to say." "I do, and the answer is no." Nathan laughed again, but this time the sound came out forced. "You were always dramatic, and you were always manipulative." The conversation was interrupted by the sound of a spoon tapping against a champagne flute. The museum director was asking for attention to begin the official presentations. Emily took advantage of the distraction to move away from Nathan, mixing with the other guests. For the next 2 hours, she successfully avoided him, always staying in motion, always busy with professional conversations. But when it was time to leave, Boston decided to conspire against her. A torrential rain began to fall, turning the streets into small rivers and making the few available taxis as disputed as gold. Emily found herself trapped in the museum lobby, along with a dozen other guests, all waiting for the storm to subside. Nathan approached her with 2 glasses of wine. "Looks like we'll have to wait together." Emily accepted the glass more out of politeness than desire. The wine was good dry, with a flavor reminiscent of wet earth. Zoe didn't stay. She left earlier. "Had an important meeting early tomorrow." They sat on a bench near the windows, watching the rain fall on the Charles River. The streetlights created golden reflections in the water, like brushstrokes of paint on a dark canvas. "Do you remember the first time we were caught in the rain together?" Nathan asked softly. Emily remembered. Of course she remembered. They had taken shelter in a bookstore in downtown Chicago, waiting for a similar rain to pass. Nathan had bought a book of poems by Emily Dickinson just to impress her, then confessed he had never read poetry in his life. She had found that adorable. What an idiot she had been. "No, liar! Nathan, please, please what? Can't we talk like 2 adults?" Emily looked at him with a mixture of disbelief and anger. 2 adults? Are you serious?" "I am. You disappeared from my life overnight. Literally. One day we were making plans to live together, the next you weren't answering my calls anymore. I found out by chance, through a mutual friend, that you had married your childhood fiancé. A fiancé that, by the way, you never mentioned during the 8 months we were together." Nathan lowered his eyes to his wine glass. "It was complicated." "Complicated." Emily repeated the word with contempt. "That's your explanation? It was complicated." "Emily, you don't understand. My family, the circumstances. I had no choice. We all have choices, Nathan. You chose what was most convenient for you." He drank his wine in one gulp before responding. "You're right, I was a coward. But it doesn't mean I didn't suffer too. Poor thing. I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness after so long, but you really don't." Emily stood up, "and I don't accept it." Nathan stood up too, standing very close to her. "What do you want from me, Emily? For me to humiliate myself? To beg for forgiveness? I don't want anything from you. Absolutely nothing." I want you to continue your life with your young and talented girlfriend and leave me in peace. And if I say I can't? The question was asked in such a low tone that Emily almost didn't hear it over the sound of the rain. But she did hear, and she felt something move deep in her chest, like a sleeping animal awakening against her will. Then you'll have to learn how. She headed for the door. The rain had diminished enough that she could walk to the nearest taxi stand. Nathan didn't follow her, but she felt the weight of his gaze until she disappeared into the wet darkness of Boston. That night, in her quiet apartment, Emily stayed awake until late, looking out the window at the city lights. She thought of angels with blindfolded eyes, of symbols hidden beneath layers of paint, of secrets that insisted on resurfacing even when believed to be buried forever. She thought of Nathan and Zoe, of how he had touched her, of the familiarity of those gestures that had once been directed at her. And for the first time in 5 years, Emily wondered if she had really overcome the past or merely learned to live with its scars. 3 days after the reunion, Emily was in Millbrook, standing before the altarpiece that would change everything. The piece had been transported to a converted warehouse behind the Abbey, transformed into a restoration laboratory with state-of-the-art equipment. The natural light filtered through high windows created an almost sacred atmosphere, and Emily felt like an archaeologist about to discover secrets buried for centuries. The altarpiece was even more impressive in person. It was over 10 feet tall and divided into 5 main panels, each telling part of St. Anthony's life. But as Emily examined the piece with a magnifying glass and ultraviolet light, she realized that the official story was just the surface. Under the layers of paint and varnish, other images emerged like ghosts. Blindfolded women, children with sewn mouths, angels weeping tears of blood. "It's disturbing, isn't it?" Zoe's voice made her start. The young woman was standing at the entrance to the warehouse, wearing a long white cotton dress that made her appear even more ethereal against the golden morning light. "Zoe!" Emily removed her protective glasses. "I didn't know you were coming here." "Nathan brought me. He had a meeting with the abbot about legal issues of the project." Zoe approached the altarpiece, observing it carefully. "There's something about these figures that makes me uneasy." Emily studied the young woman's expression. There was a tension in her delicate features that wasn't present on the museum night. "Uneasy how?" "I can't explain. It's as if they were trying to tell me something." Zoe lightly touched her stomach, an almost unconscious gesture. "Do you believe that ancient objects can carry memories?" The question surprised Emily. It was exactly the kind of reflection she herself made, but rarely heard from others. "I do. Each work of art is a testimony to what people lived, felt, feared. Sometimes I think that restoring is like doing therapy with ghosts." Zoe smiled, and for the first time, Emily saw something genuine in her expression, a vulnerability that made her lower some defenses. "Nathan said you met in California." "Did he?" Emily turned her attention back to the altarpiece, feigning indifference. "And what else did he say?" "That you worked together on some projects. That you're brilliant at what you do." Zoe hesitated, "But there's something in the way he talks about you, as if there were more story to tell." Emily felt her stomach contract. Nathan had always been skilled at omitting truths without technically lying. It was a talent she had learned to recognize too late. People like Nathan always have more story to tell than they admit. "What do you mean by people like Nathan?" Emily stopped what she was doing and looked directly at Zoe. The young woman deserved at least a warning, even if indirect. "Charming, intelligent men who know exactly what to say to make you feel special. They're dangerous because they rarely lie completely, they just omit inconvenient parts of the truth." Zoe lowered her eyes, and Emily realized she had touched on something sensitive. "Do you think he's omitting something from me?" "I think you're young, talented, and deserve someone who is completely honest with you." Before Zoe could respond, Nathan appeared at the entrance to the warehouse. He was wearing a navy blue suit that enhanced his dark eyes, and Emily hated herself for noticing how he could still steal the air from the room simply by entering it. "Here you are." He approached, kissed Zoe's cheek, and looked at Emily with an intensity she pretended not to notice. "How's the work going?" "Complex." Emily turned her attention back to the altarpiece. "The piece has at least 6 different layers of paint. It will take months to completely reveal what's underneath. And is it worth it?" "Every truth is worth revealing, Nathan, even when it's uncomfortable." The comment was loaded with double meaning, and all three perceived it. Zoe looked from one to the other with a confused expression, as if trying to decipher a coded conversation. "Well, let's leave Emily to work." Nathan touched Zoe's arm. "We have lunch scheduled with the head priest." "Actually, I'd like to stay a bit longer." Zoe looked at Emily. "If you don't mind the company, I promise not to disturb." Emily hesitated. Part of her wanted to be alone with her work, but another part, the part that still remembered what it was like to be manipulated by Nathan, felt a protective instinct toward the young woman. "Of course, you can stay." Nathan seemed displeased, but couldn't protest without appearing controlling. "All right, I'll pick you up in 2 hours." After he left, the warehouse seemed more peaceful. Emily and Zoe worked in silence for some time, one restoring, the other simply observing. It was Zoe who broke the silence. "Can I tell you something? Something I haven't even told Nathan?" Emily stopped working. "Of course. I'm pregnant." The revelation dropped like a bomb in the silence of the warehouse. Emily turned completely to Zoe, who was sitting on a high stool, hands folded in her lap. "Pregnant? How long?" 6 weeks. I found out last week." Zoe smiled, but it was a tense smile full of fear. "I haven't had the courage to tell him yet." "Why not?" "Because—" Zoe hesitated, biting her lower lip. "Because I don't know how he'll react. Nathan is complicated with these things. He had a wife before me, did you know?" Emily felt her heart speed up. "He did. Rebecca. She died 8 years ago in a car accident. Nathan never talks about her, but sometimes I find him looking at old photos with an expression devastated." Zoe wiped away a tear that insisted on falling. "I think he still loves her, and I'm afraid that a pregnancy will make him run away." Emily processed the information. Nathan married, Nathan widowed. Another piece of his life that she knew nothing about. "Zoe, if Nathan loves you, he'll be happy with the news." "You think?" The hope in the young woman's voice was painful to hear. "I think you deserve someone who will be happy with the news. If he's not, maybe he's not the right person for you." Zoe nodded slowly, then got up and walked to one of the high windows. The midday light created a golden halo around her silhouette, and Emily thought she looked like a Renaissance Madonna, beautiful and melancholic. "There's one more thing." Zoe spoke without turning around. "I've been receiving strange messages." "What kind of messages?" "Notes left under my door, dead flowers on my work table. Someone follows me sometimes. I can feel it." Zoe turned to Emily, and her eyes were full of fear. "Yesterday, I found a photo of me sleeping glued to the bathroom mirror. Someone entered my apartment while I was sleeping and photographed me." Emily stood up alarmed. "Have you told the police?" "I told Nathan. He said it was probably some obsessed fan, that this happens to artists." "But," Zoe hugged herself, "it doesn't seem like fan obsession. It seems like revenge." "Revenge for what?" "I don't know. It's just a feeling." Emily approached Zoe and gently touched her arm. "You can't ignore this. If someone is threatening you, they're not direct threats, they're more like warnings. As if someone wanted me to know they're watching me." At that moment, Emily heard footsteps approaching the warehouse. Instinctively, the two moved apart, as if they were discussing secrets that shouldn't be shared. Nathan appeared at the door, smiling. "Ready for lunch?" Zoe nodded and headed for the exit, but when she passed by Emily, she whispered softly, "Please don't tell him anything." "Not yet." Emily was left alone in the warehouse, but she couldn't concentrate on her work anymore. Zoe's revelations echoed in her mind. The pregnancy, the mysterious messages, the dead ex-wife. Something was very wrong with that story, a feeling that important pieces of the puzzle were missing. She decided to take a break for lunch in the nearby village. But first, she wanted to better examine the base of the altarpiece, an area she hadn't yet fully explored. She knelt on the floor and illuminated the details of the ancient wood with a flashlight. That's when she saw something that made her heart stop. Wedged between two boards at the base, almost imperceptible, was an edge of yellowed paper. Emily took a pair of tweezers and carefully extracted what appeared to be a very old letter, folded multiple times and dried by time. The paper was in poor condition, but it was still possible to read some excerpts. The text was in Latin, written in an elegant but trembling calligraphy, as if the author was in a hurry or afraid. Emily mentally translated the fragments she could decipher. Sanctificare dolorem femininum in nomine puritatis. Sacrificium necessarium pro salvatione animarum. Sanguis innocentium lavat peccata patrum. Sanctify feminine pain in the name of purity. Necessary sacrifice for the salvation of souls. The blood of the innocent washes away the sins of the fathers. Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. The text suggested some kind of ritual, something related to the suffering of women as a form of spiritual purification. But it was at the end of the letter that she found something that made the world stop around her. A signature still legible despite the centuries. Reynolds of Salisbury, Anno Domini 1654. Reynolds of Salisbury. Nathan's maternal surname, which he had mentioned only once, in passing, during a conversation about family genealogy. The surname he always avoided commenting on. Emily read the letter again, trying to fully absorb its meaning. There was a lineage, a family tradition related to what the author called purification through feminine suffering. And somehow Nathan's family was connected to this. She carefully photographed the letter, then stored it in a conservation envelope. She needed more time to study it, to fully understand its implications. But one certainty was already forming in her mind. There were no coincidences. Nathan wasn't in Millbrook by chance, and his connection to that project went far beyond legal issues. That afternoon, Emily couldn't work anymore. She returned to the small hotel where she was staying and locked herself in the room, studying the photographs of the letter on her laptop. She researched the Reynolds of Salisbury family on the internet, but found only vague references to a lineage of English merchants from the 17th century. It was almost at the end of the afternoon that she received a call from Zoe. The young woman's voice was trembling, frightened. "Emily, can you come here, please? Something happened." "Where are you?" "In my hotel room, room 205. Please, come quickly." Emily found Zoe sitting on the bed, hugging her knees, completely pale. The room was disheveled, as if someone had been searching for something. "What happened?" "Someone entered here while I was in the shower." Zoe pointed to the bedside table. "They left that. On the nightstand was a bouquet of white roses, but all the flowers were dead, with darkened petals and broken stems. In the middle of the bouquet, a card with a single handwritten phrase, 'Not every seed should germinate.'" Emily felt her blood freeze. It was a direct threat to Zoe's pregnancy. "Have you told Nathan?" "I tried to call but couldn't reach him. The cell phone goes straight to voicemail." Zoe got up from the bed, agitated. "Emily, I'm scared. Who could know about the pregnancy? I haven't told anyone but you." Emily studied the room, looking for signs of intrusion. The lock wasn't damaged. The windows were intact. Whoever had entered there had the keys or knew how to open the door without leaving traces. "Zoe, you need to get out of here. Now." "Where to?" "To my room. We'll stay together until we figure out what's happening." They went to Emily's room, which was on the floor above. Zoe lay down on the bed, exhausted by fear and stress. Emily sat in the chair by the window, watching the street for any suspicious movement. "Emily?" Zoe's voice was sleepy. "Yes? Did you have children?" The question hit Emily like a punch in the stomach. She closed her eyes, remembering something she had buried so deep that sometimes she could pretend it never happened. "No. Never wanted to." Emily was silent for so long that Zoe thought she had fallen asleep. But then she spoke, her voice low and distant. "Once, a long time ago, I thought I wanted to. But I discovered that some people don't deserve to leave their mark on the world." Zoe didn't ask anything else and soon fell asleep. Emily stayed awake all night, standing guard and thinking about the letter she had found, the threats to Zoe, the connection between all this and Nathan. It was almost dawn when she made a decision. She called a journalist friend in California, someone who specialized in genealogical investigations. "Amanda, it's me, Emily. I need you to research a family for me. Reynolds of Salisbury. Anything you find, no matter how strange it seems." Reynolds of Salisbury, that name sounds familiar. Let me check my files. While waiting for Amanda's response, Emily looked at Zoe, sleeping peacefully on the bed. The young woman seemed so vulnerable, so innocent of all the complexity of the situation she was in. Emily felt a wave of protection that surprised her with its intensity. She would not allow Zoe to go through what she had gone through 5 years ago, no matter what it cost. The phone rang. "Emily, I found some interesting things about this family and some very disturbing ones." "Tell me." The Reynolds of Salisbury were an important family in England in the 17th and 18th centuries. Merchants, landowners, very religious. But there are strange records in the Inquisition archives. Several women in the family were accused of witchcraft or immoral behavior. Many died in mysterious circumstances. Emily felt a chill. "Continue." "The strangest thing is that there's a pattern. In each generation, at least one woman in the family died young, usually shortly after becoming pregnant. The men always remarried quickly, always with very young women, as if what? As if they needed fertile women for something. Emily, this family has a very dark history. Are you sure you want to get involved with this?" Emily looked at Zoe, then at the photographed letter on her cell phone. "I'm already involved, Amanda. Thank you very much." She hung up the phone and sat watching the sun rise over Millbrook. The town was waking up slowly, with the church bell marking the hours as it had done for centuries. But Emily knew that this morning would be different from all others. She had found more than hidden symbols in an ancient altarpiece. She had found the pieces of a puzzle that connected the past to the present, Nathan to his dark ancestry, and Zoe to a danger that neither of them yet fully understood. And for the first time in 5 years, Emily wondered if some truths were too dangerous to be revealed. The morning brought with it a call that would change everything. Emily was preparing coffee when the phone rang, and the voice of Amanda, her journalist friend, sounded tense on the other end of the line. "Emily, I need to tell you something. I continued researching the Reynolds of Salisbury after our conversation, and I found something that kept me up all night." Zoe was still sleeping in the room, exhausted by the events of the previous night. Emily lowered her voice. "What did you discover?" "There are records that the family maintained a kind of private cult. Inquisition documents mention rituals where women were purified through suffering to ensure the salvation of the male souls of the lineage." Amanda paused. "Emily, these women didn't die by chance. They were sacrificed." The coffee spilled on the counter when the cup trembled in Emily's hands. "Sacrificed how?" "The details are vague, but there are mentions of sacred bleeding and offering of the unborn fruit. They became pregnant, and then—" Amanda's voice faltered. "Emily, you said you know someone from this family." "I do." Emily cleaned up the spilled coffee with trembling hands. "And he's involved with a young pregnant woman. My God, you need to get her away from him, now." After hanging up, Emily stood in the small hotel kitchen, processing the information. A lineage of men who sanctified female suffering. Women who died pregnant, generation after generation, and Nathan, a direct descendant of this dark line, involved with Zoe, who carried his child. The sound of footsteps in the hallway made her move quickly to the window. Nathan was walking toward the hotel, wearing a black suit that made him look even more imposing against the clear morning of Millbrook. His movements were determined, almost predatory. Emily ran to the room and gently woke Zoe. "Zoe, Nathan is coming. Do you want me to stay here when he comes up?" The young woman sat up in bed, still sleepy, but her eyes immediately filled with fear. "He knows where I am. He must have asked at reception." Emily sat on the edge of the bed. "Zoe, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "What? Has Nathan ever hurt you physically? Ever?" The question seemed to shock Zoe. "No, he never. Why are you asking this?" Before Emily could answer, firm knocks on the door echoed through the room. Nathan's voice came muffled through the wood. "Emily, I know Zoe is there. We need to talk." The two women looked at each other. Emily gestured for Zoe to stay in the bathroom, but the young woman shook her head. "I can't keep running from him forever." Emily opened the door, partially blocking the entrance with her body. Nathan was impeccable as always, but there was something different in his eyes, an intensity she didn't remember seeing before. "Nathan, where is she?" "Resting. She had a difficult night." Nathan pushed the door harder, forcing Emily to take a step back. "Zoe!" He entered the room and saw the young woman sitting on the bed, pale and visibly shaken. His expression immediately softened. "Love, are you okay? I tried to call you last night but couldn't get through. Someone entered my room." Zoe's voice came out small, almost childish. "They left dead flowers and a note." Nathan approached the bed and sat beside her, pulling her into an embrace that seemed genuinely protective. "Why didn't you call me immediately?" "I tried. Your phone was off." Emily observed the interaction between the two, looking for signs of the manipulation she knew so well, but Nathan seemed genuinely concerned, almost desperate to console her. "I need to see the note." He looked at Emily. "Do you have it?" Emily hesitated, then took the card from her pocket. Nathan read the message. Not every seed should germinate, and his expression hardened. "That son of a bitch." He stood up abruptly. "I'm going to talk to the hotel manager. Someone has access to the room keys." "Nathan, wait." Emily touched his arm. "We need to talk. Alone." He looked at Zoe, then at Emily, and something passed between them. A silent communication loaded with tension. "Zoe, love, can you take a shower? Get ready. We're leaving Millbrook today." "Where to?" "To Boston, far away from here." Nathan kissed her forehead. 10 minutes, okay?" After Zoe entered the bathroom, Nathan turned to Emily with an expression she couldn't decipher. "What do you want to talk to me about?" Emily took a deep breath. It was now or never. "About your family, about the Reynolds of Salisbury." Nathan's reaction was immediate and intense. His face contracted, as if she had just revealed his most intimate secret. "How did you—" "I found a letter in the altarpiece, signed by someone from your family. 17th century." Emily walked to the window, keeping her distance. "I did some research." "What kind of research?" "Enough to know that your lineage has a disturbing history." Nathan was silent for a long moment, then laughed, a bitter sound that Emily had never heard before. "You know nothing, Emily. I know that the women in your family had a habit of dying young and pregnant. I know there are records of strange rituals, of private cults. I know you never mention that side of your family. And what exactly do you think that means?" Emily turned to face him directly. "I think Zoe is in danger, and I think you know it." The accusation hung in the air between them like a blade. Nathan observed her with an intensity that made Emily instinctively back away. "You think I would harm Zoe? I think you harmed me. The response came out before she could control herself. Nathan took a step toward her, and Emily felt her heart speed up, not from fear, but from something much more complicated. What I did to you was different. Was it? How? Because you were never innocent like her. Nathan was very close now, and Emily could feel the heat emanating from his body. You always knew exactly who I was. I didn't. If I had, I would never have gotten involved with you. Liar. He touched her face with a gentleness that contrasted with the hardness of his voice. You fell in love with exactly the dangerous part of me. With the part that couldn't promise you a clean and simple future. Emily tried to move away, but Nathan held her wrist. Do you remember the first time we made love? Nathan, don't do this. You begged me not to stop. Said you wanted me to mark you, that you wanted to carry my mark forever. His fingers traced a line from her wrist to her shoulder. You got what you wanted. 5 years, Emily. 5 years, and you still tremble when I touch you. Emily closed her eyes, hating herself for the way her body reacted to him, hating herself for still desiring a man who had destroyed her once and who now, possibly, was doing the same thing to another woman. Let go of my arm. Why? Because Zoe is in the shower 3 meters away? Because this is wrong. Nathan moved even closer, his mouth almost touching her ear. Or because you're afraid to admit you still want me. The sound of the shower water stopped. The two quickly moved apart, like teenagers caught in the act. When Zoe came out of the bathroom, she found Nathan arranging his things and Emily standing by the window, both carefully avoiding looking at each other. Ready to go? Nathan asked, his voice returning to the gentle tone he used with her. Nathan, can I talk to you? Zoe seemed nervous, as if she had made an important decision. It's about something I discovered recently. Emily felt her stomach sink. Zoe was going to tell him about the pregnancy, right there, at that moment, in front of her. Of course, love. What is it? Zoe looked at Emily, who nodded encouragingly. I'm pregnant. The silence that followed was deafening. Nathan remained completely still, as if he had turned to stone. His expression was unreadable, but Emily noticed that his hands closed into fists. Pregnant. He repeated the word, as if it were in a foreign language. 6 weeks. I know we didn't plan it, but... Zoe approached him, touching his arm. Are you happy? Nathan looked at her, then at Emily, then back at Zoe. When he finally spoke, his voice was strangely controlled. Of course I'm happy. It's just that... it's a surprise. He hugged Zoe, but over her shoulder, his eyes met Emily's. And in that look was something that made her blood freeze. It wasn't happiness, nor surprise. It was recognition, as if he knew that moment would come, as if he had been waiting for it. Let's get out of here, Nathan said, still holding Zoe. Right now. While they packed their things, Emily invented an excuse to stay a few more days in Millbrook, finishing the initial cataloguing of the altarpiece. In truth, she wanted time to process everything she had discovered and decide what to do with this information. Nathan didn't insist that she come along, which made her even more suspicious. When they said goodbye in the hotel lobby, he kissed her cheek in a completely chaste manner, but whispered in her ear, This isn't over between us, Emily. It will never be over. Zoe hugged her more tightly than necessary. Thank you for taking care of me last night. You're a true friend. The word friend echoed in Emily's mind as she watched the car disappear down the road to Boston. Was she Zoe's friend, or was she using the young woman to get closer to Nathan? The line between protection and manipulation was becoming dangerously thin. That afternoon, alone in the restoration warehouse, Emily decided to examine the altarpiece more deeply. If there was a letter hidden in the base, perhaps there were other secrets buried in the ancient wood. Armed with portable radiography equipment, she began to systematically scan each panel of the work. It was on the third panel, the one depicting St. Anthony preaching to the fish, that she found something extraordinary. Under the layer of paint, showing the fish listening to the saint, there was another completely different image. Naked women kneeling in a circle with their hands tied behind their backs and expressions of pain and ecstasy on their faces. In the center of the circle, a man in ecclesiastical garments held a dagger over a pregnant woman lying on what appeared to be a stone altar. Emily photographed everything meticulously, feeling nausea growing in her stomach. This wasn't sacred art, it was documentation of a ritual, a pictorial confession of crimes committed in the name of faith. She was so absorbed in her work that she didn't notice when someone entered the warehouse. It was only when a shadow blocked the window light that she turned around. A man was standing at the entrance, tall, thin, wearing dark clothes that seemed antiquated. His face was partially hidden by the strong light coming from behind him, but Emily could see that he was older, perhaps 60, with grey hair combed back. "Sorry, the warehouse is closed to visitors," Emily said, trying to keep her voice firm. The man didn't respond, just walked slowly toward the altarpiece. His footsteps echoed in the silence almost hypnotically. "Excuse me, I said that." Emily began again, but he interrupted her. "You've found things you shouldn't have found." The voice was polite, almost gentle, but there was something in it that made Emily instinctively back away. She looked at the exit, calculating if she could reach it before him. "I don't know what you're talking about." The man smiled, and that's when Emily clearly saw his eyes. They were exactly like Nathan's, dark, intense, with the same disturbing ability to seem like they knew secrets about her. "You're very much like Rebecca," he said, coming closer. "The same stubbornness, the same tendency to meddle where you're not called." Emily felt her heart stop. Rebecca, Nathan's wife, the first wife. The man stopped in front of the altarpiece, observing the hidden images Emily had revealed. "She was also a restorer, you know. Very talented, very curious. She died in a car accident." "She died, yes." He lightly touched one of the sculpted female figures. "But it wasn't exactly an accident." Emily felt her legs shake. She was alone there with a man who had just indirectly admitted that he had murdered Nathan's first wife. "Who are you?" "I'm Nathan's father, Richard Reynolds." He turned to her, and his smile was as cold as death. "And you, my dear Emily, are asking exactly the same questions that Rebecca asked." Emily forced herself to stay calm. "Does Nathan know you're here?" "Nathan doesn't know many things. He inherited the family's sensitivity, but not the complete understanding of our purpose." Richard walked around the altarpiece like a predator circling its prey. "Rebecca discovered about our lineage, about our methods of preserving the spiritual purity of the family, the rituals." "Rituals?" He repeated the word with disdain. "You see only the surface. You don't understand that some traditions exist for reasons that transcend common understanding." Emily took another step back, but he continued talking as if giving a lecture. "For centuries, the men of our lineage were blessed with special gifts. Vision, intuition, the ability to influence others. But these gifts come with a price. They must be renewed, purified through sacrifice. Sacrifice of pregnant women. Sacrifice of those who carry our seed. The innocent blood cleanses accumulated sins, renews our power, ensures that the next generation maintains the gifts." He stopped right in front of her. Rebecca didn't understand this. She tried to convince Nathan to break with tradition. Emily could barely breathe. "And you killed her." "I preserved the lineage." Richard extended his hand, as if to touch her, but Emily dodged. "Just as I will preserve it now." "Nathan won't let you hurt Zoe." Richard laughed, a sound that seemed to come from a very deep and dark place. "Nathan has no choice, just as he had none with Rebecca." "You think he didn't know? That he didn't participate?" Richard moved closer. "My son is much more like me than he would like to admit." The world seemed to collapse around Emily. Nathan knew. Nathan had participated in Rebecca's death. And now Zoe was alone with him in Boston, pregnant, unaware of the danger she was in. Emily pretended to stumble, dodging Richard and running toward the exit. But he was faster than he seemed, blocking her path with frightening ease. "Where do you think you're going?" "Someone is waiting for me if I don't show up." "No one is waiting for you, Emily, and even if they were, it wouldn't matter." Richard took something from his pocket. A syringe. "You're going to sleep for a few hours. When you wake up, you'll be in a place where you can reflect on the choices you've made." Emily tried to scream, but no sound came out. She tried to run again, but her feet seemed glued to the floor. The last thing she saw before fainting was Richard putting away the syringe and picking up the phone. "Nathan, it's me. We have a problem." Darkness swallowed Emily before she could hear the rest of the conversation. But in her last moments of consciousness, a terrible certainty crystallized in her mind. Zoe was in mortal danger, and she was the only person who knew the truth. And now she could do nothing to save her. Emily woke up in absolute darkness. Her head was throbbing, and the metallic taste in her mouth indicated she had been drugged. She tried to move, but her hands were tied behind her back. The floor beneath her was cold and damp, probably stone. The air smelled of mold and incense, a combination that made her skin crawl. Gradually, her eyes adjusted to the dimness. She was in some sort of basement or crypt, with ancient stone walls and candles scattered in niches. The flames flickered, creating dancing shadows that looked like moving figures. In the center of the room was a marble altar stained dark, old blood that had penetrated the stone over centuries. Emily struggled against the ropes, but they were tied tightly. It was then that she heard voices coming from somewhere above, two male voices in heated discussion. "She can't just disappear, Father. People will look for her." Nathan's voice. Emily closed her eyes, feeling a mixture of relief and betrayal. At least he was alive, and apparently questioning his father. "Nobody will look for her, Nathan. She's in Massachusetts alone, doesn't have close family in California, just another tourist who decided to disappear." Richard's voice sounded calm, calculating. "Besides, we have more urgent matters to resolve." "What matters?" "Zoe is pregnant." Silence. Emily held her breath, waiting for Nathan's reaction. "I know. She told me this morning." "Then you know what needs to be done." "Father, we can't. She's different. I love her." Richard laughed, a humorless sound that echoed off the stone walls. "You loved Rebecca too. Remember how that ended?" "Rebecca discovered about our family. Zoe doesn't know anything. And Emily, she knows. She saw the letter, did the research, discovered the images in the altarpiece. You think she's going to stay quiet?" Emily heard footsteps approaching. She quickly closed her eyes, pretending to still be unconscious. Emily was always stubborn. Nathan's voice was closer now. "But that doesn't mean she needs to die, doesn't it?" Richard descended the stone stairs, his footsteps echoing in the silence. "She has interfered too much, and now she knows about Rebecca." Nathan appeared in Emily's field of vision. Even pretending to be unconscious, she could feel him approaching. He knelt beside her, and she felt his fingers lightly touch her wrist, checking her pulse. "She's waking up," Nathan said. Emily had no choice but to open her eyes. Nathan was very close, studying her face with an expression she couldn't decipher. "Where am I?" Her voice came out hoarse. "Safe." Richard appeared beside his son. "In the crypt of our family property, the same place where Rebecca spent her last hours." Emily tried to sit up, but the ropes made movement difficult. Nathan helped her, supporting her back against the stone wall. "Nathan, you need to listen to me." Emily looked directly into his eyes. "Zoe is in danger. Your father is going to kill her just like he killed Rebecca." "I didn't kill Rebecca," Richard corrected with irritating calmness. "Rebecca killed herself. When she learned what would happen to her and the baby, she preferred to drive the car into a tree rather than face the sacrificial altar." Emily felt nausea rise in her throat. You terrorized her until she preferred to die. I enlightened her about her role in our lineage. She chose cowardice. Nathan stood up abruptly, walking to the other side of the crypt. Father, enough. We're not doing this again. Not doing what? Preserving our heritage, keeping alive the gifts that have been granted to us for generations. Richard turned to his son with flaming eyes. You think your ability to seduce any woman you desire, your supernatural intuition in business, your ability to manipulate situations to your advantage came from where? Emily observed Nathan struggle with his father's words. There was something in his posture that suggested a deep internal conflict. These gifts aren't worth the price we pay. No, Richard laughed. Then renounce them. Live as a common, insignificant man, without power or influence. See how Zoe will continue to love you when you're just another mediocre lawyer. Nathan clenched his fists, and Emily saw muscles contract in his jaw. She loves me for who I am. She loves what you're able to make her feel, the magnetism, the intensity, the way you can dominate any environment you enter. Take that away from her, and what's left? Richard approached his son. A common man with serious family problems. Emily felt that this was the moment. If there was a chance to break the cycle, it was now, with Nathan divided between two visions of what could be. Nathan, look at me. He turned and his eyes were full of pain. 5 years ago, when you left me, was it because your father told you I would discover about the family? Nathan hesitated, then nodded. He said you were too intelligent. Too curious, that eventually you would ask the right questions, and you believed him. Nathan ran his hands through his hair. I was afraid that you would see me as a monster. And now, what do you think I see? Nathan didn't answer, but Emily saw tears forming in his eyes. I see a man who still has choices to make. Emily forced her voice to sound firm, despite the ropes cutting into her wrists. I see someone who can break a cycle of centuries of violence. Richard interrupted the moment, walking to a wall of the crypt where Emily noticed, for the first time, that ancient weapons were hanging. Daggers, ropes, instruments that seemed designed to cause pain. Enough drama. Richard picked up a ceremonial dagger, its blade reflecting the candlelight. Nathan, you have a simple choice. Kill Emily now, and Zoe will never know about our family. She will give birth to our heir and live in blissful ignorance for the rest of her short life. Or refuse, and I'll take care of both of them. Which do you prefer? The ultimatum hung in the air like poison. Emily saw Nathan close his eyes, fighting demons she couldn't imagine. There's a third option. The voice came from the entrance to the crypt. Everyone turned. Zoe was at the top of the stairs, but she wasn't the fragile and ethereal young woman Emily knew. Her eyes were hard as diamonds, and in her hands was a revolver pointed directly at Richard. Zoe, Nathan took a step toward her. How did I find you? It wasn't difficult. I followed the GPS on your car. Zoe descended the stairs slowly, keeping the gun steady. The real question is, how long have you known that I knew? Emily felt the world spin. There was something in Zoe's voice, in the way she held the gun, that suggested experience. Knew what? Nathan seemed genuinely confused. About the Reynolds of Salisbury family, about the rituals, about what happened to Rebecca. Zoe stopped a few meters from Richard, keeping enough distance not to be disarmed. You think it was coincidence that I appeared in your life exactly when I did? Richard dropped the dagger, his hands rising slightly. Who are you? Zoe smiled, but there was no warmth in the gesture. I'm Zoe Miller Stevens. Rebecca Stevens was my older sister. The silence that followed was absolute. Emily felt as if the air had been sucked from the crypt. Impossible. Richard shook his head. Rebecca was an only child. Rebecca was an only child to the parents who raised her. But our biological mother had 2 daughters before dying in childbirth with the third. Zoe kept the revolver pointed at Richard as she spoke. Rebecca was adopted by a middle-class family. I grew up in orphanages. But we found each other when she started investigating her origins. Nathan leaned against the wall, as if his legs might give out. You sought me out deliberately, just as Emily sought you out. Zoe looked at Emily with something that could be compassion, only for different reasons. Emily frowned. I didn't seek out Nathan. It was coincidence. Was it? Zoe chuckled softly. Emily, who do you think suggested your name for the Millbrook Restoration Project? Who ensured that Nathan would be designated as legal consultant? Emily's world completely collapsed. Nothing had been coincidence. She had been manipulated from the beginning. Why? Emily whispered. Because I needed a witness. Someone Nathan respected who could expose the truth if something went wrong. Zoe kept her eyes on Richard. And because I knew you were the only person in the world who could make Nathan question his choices. Nathan took a step toward Zoe, but she gestured with the gun for him to stop. Zoe, you're pregnant. You shouldn't be here. I'm not pregnant, Nathan. The revelation fell like a bomb. I never was. It was part of the plan. Richard began to laugh, a hysterical sound that echoed off the stone walls. What an elaborate plan! What perfect revenge! He looked at his son. You were fooled by a child, Nathan. A child who manipulated you better than you ever manipulated any woman. Shut up. Zoe kept the gun steady. Nathan cut Emily's ropes. Nathan hesitated. Now! Zoe shouted, and there was something in her voice that made everyone in the crypt instinctively obey. Nathan picked up the dagger Richard had dropped and cut Emily's ropes. She rubbed her wrists, trying to restore circulation while processing all the revelations. Zoe, what's your plan? Emily asked. Originally? To make Nathan fall in love with me, fake a pregnancy, and then expose the entire family when he tried to kill me. Zoe kept her eyes on Richard. But things got complicated when I realized that Nathan really didn't know everything. I never knew the details, Nathan said, his voice broken. My father always said the women died in accidents, that the family was cursed, but not that. Not that they were murdered. Richard laughed again. Naive! How do you think the accidents happened at the right time, generation after generation? Nathan looked at his father with growing horror. You killed them. All of them. I preserved our lineage, just as my father did, and his father before him. Richard straightened up, regaining some of his arrogance. And you three fools think you can break centuries of tradition. We can and we will, Zoe said firmly. Emily, is there anything in your bag that can help us? Emily frowned, then remembered. My bag, where is it? Nathan pointed to a corner of the crypt. Emily ran to it and took out her phone, which miraculously still had battery. I've been recording this conversation for 5 minutes. Emily showed the device. Everything Richard said about the murders is recorded. Richard took a threatening step toward Emily, but Zoe moved the gun. Don't even think about it. You won't shoot me, child, Richard said with disdain. You don't have the courage. I watched my sister drive into a tree at 60 miles per hour because you convinced her that her only choice was to die. Zoe's voice was as cold as ice. You really think I don't have the courage? Something in her expression made Richard back away. Nathan, Zoe said without taking her eyes off Richard, you have a real choice now. You can continue to be your father's accomplice, or you can help stop this forever. Nathan looked from his father to Zoe, then to Emily. His eyes lingered on Emily's face, and she saw something break in him, a barrier he had built over years. Father, you destroyed my life once. I won't let you destroy it again. Richard looked at his son with contempt. You're weak. You always were. Just like your mother. Maybe. Nathan moved closer to Emily. But I'd rather be weak than a monster. That's when Richard moved. He took advantage of a moment of distraction from Zoe to lunge toward her, trying to disarm the young woman. But Zoe was prepared. The shot echoed through the crypt like thunder. Richard fell to the floor, clutching his shoulder, blood flowing between his fingers. That's for what you did to Rebecca, Zoe said, keeping the gun pointed at him, and for the countless women you killed before her. Emily called the police, while Nathan used his tie to stop his father's bleeding. By the time the ambulance and police cars arrived, it was almost dawn. Richard was arrested and taken to the hospital under police escort. Emily's recording, combined with evidence found in the crypt and on the altarpiece, would be enough to ensure he spent the rest of his life in prison. 3 months later, Emily was back in Boston, but this time she wasn't alone. Nathan had renounced his family inheritance and was working as an independent consultant, helping victims of family crimes. It was a job that didn't pay well, but gave him peace of mind. They were in Emily's apartment, cooking together, something they had never done in their California days. Nathan was chopping onions while Emily prepared a sauce, and the domesticity of the moment surprised them. "Do you miss it?" Emily asked. "Miss what?" "The gifts. The power your family had." Nathan stopped cutting and looked at her. "Sometimes, especially when I'm trying to convince a judge to accept a difficult case." He smiled. "But then I remember the price we always paid for it." Emily approached him, gently touching his face. "And do you feel that I'm enough, without all that supernatural intensity?" Nathan took her hand and kissed her palm. "Emily, you're the only person who ever loved me knowing exactly who I was, not what I could do for you, not what I represented, but who I really was." He pulled her into an embrace. How could that not be enough? They kissed there in the kitchen with the smell of garlic and onions in the air, and it was different from all the kisses they had shared before. There was no manipulation, no power games, no secrets. It was just love, finally free to exist without shadows from the past. "And Zoe?" Emily asked when they separated. "Have you heard from her?" "She's doing well. Went back to California, opened an exhibition called Silenced Voices about women victims of family violence." Nathan smiled. "Said she finally found her true calling." Emily nodded. Zoe deserved to find peace after everything she had planned and executed to avenge her sister. "Do you forgive her for having lied, for having manipulated us?" Nathan thought for a moment. "She gave us the chance to choose who we wanted to be. I can't be angry about that." That night, lying in bed, Emily traced patterns on Nathan's chest with her fingers. "Nathan? Do you remember what you told me that rainy day 5 years ago?" Nathan stiffened slightly. "I said many cruel things." "No, the last thing, before you got in the taxi." He was silent for so long that Emily thought he had fallen asleep. But then he spoke, his voice low. "I said you would regret it. That one day you would realize I was the best you could have." Emily propped herself on her elbow to look at him. "You were right, but not in the way you thought." "How so?" "You were the best I could have, not because you were powerful or magnetic or mysterious." Emily kissed his chest right over his heart. "But because beneath all that, there was a man capable of choosing love over power. A man capable of breaking cycles of violence that lasted centuries." Nathan pulled her on top of him, kissing her deeply. "I love you, Emily, and this time nothing and no one will separate us. Not even shadows from the past. Not even shadows from the past." Outside, Boston slept peacefully under the stars. And in an apartment overlooking the Charles River, two people who had found their way back to each other could finally rest, knowing that some stories, the best stories, really do end with love triumphing over all the darkness that tried to destroy it. A few months later, Emily received a package in the mail. Inside was a small painting, an original by Zoe showing two women holding hands walking toward the light. On the back, a dedication to Emily and all women who refuse to be silenced. "Thank you for teaching me that the sweetest revenge is living happily. With eternal love and gratitude, Zoe." Emily hung the painting in the living room, where she and Nathan could see it every day. A reminder that they had survived, that they had chosen love, and that some scars, when properly healed, transform into wings.